This issue of pensions and retiree health care costs is the biggest fiscal issue that we all are going to face in the state of California, because either cities and counties and school districts are going to go bankrupt or they're going to die by 1,000 cuts in services.
$130 billion is the latest estimate of hard numbers, even before you factor in health benefits. That's for state and local in the state of California. Unfunded liabilities. That is 3 times the total amount of outstanding debt, total debt issued by the state of California. Triple. All the bonds.
Politicians across the state continue to negotiate larger retirement and benefit packages for public employees. Who's going to pay for all these expensive promises? As you'll see, it's all coming due next on Full Disclosure. At the end of October, the Milken Institute held a conference entitled California, the State of the State. The conference was composed of a variety of panels. One of the topics that was most alarming was the discussion of the impending financial catastrophe that will result because of unfunded or underfunded pension and retirement benefits. The host of that panel was Mr. Scott Minard. Being the news behind the news, we sought him out to get more specific information on this impending crisis.
The Government Accounting Standards Board, which is referred to as G.A.S.B, that sets the standard of reporting, financial reporting for public entities, has recently promulgated a new rule which states that all of these benefits, which are future claims against the state or the municipal entities within the state, such as pension benefits and health benefits and other post-retirement benefits, were going to have to be recorded on the financial statements of the municipalities.
So now the retirement and benefit packages promised by the politicians must be displayed openly for everyone to see. What is causing all the panic is the staggering size of these pension obligations. Apparently, no one had any idea the massive amounts of money that has been promised to the public employee retirees. We asked Mr. Minard how much.
The size of the unrecorded benefit under the rules would range somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $400 billion. If it had to be recorded today.
Keith Richman participated in the panel discussion. He shared with the audience a disturbing example of the retirement debt facing a local school district.
Said many school districts in the state of California are likely to go bankrupt because of their health care liabilities. And in fact, right here, LA Unified School District did a report, their own report, which showed that they owe $10 billion. And in order to pay that off, it's going to cost $2,100 per student every single year for the next 30 years. $2,100 per student per year for the next 30 years. And so what used to be reading, writing, and arithmetic is now reading, writing, and retiree benefits.
Is Assemblyman Richman crying wolf and overstating the seriousness of the problem, we ask him?
No, the problem's not overstated. The crisis we're talking about is all the public entities that are out there, LA Unified School District, for instance, which have massively underfunded pension and post-retirement benefit plans that is eventually going to have to be paid for. It's going to be paid, if it's going to be paid for, it's going to be paid for ultimately out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Can a booming stock market resolve the current situation?
To rely on the market to bail this out is to essentially be in the land of wishful thinking. You know, we would all like to think that we're going to see another period of time in the stock market like the late 90s during the internet bubble. But as we've seen during that period, those sorts of returns on investments were not sustainable, and we ultimately paid them back. And for those areas where no one has set any money aside, especially in the area of post-retirement benefits like health, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good the return on the market is if you have no money invested in it.
Carl DeMaio identified how we got in this mess. Weak public officials are often elected based upon their support for public pension benefits to appease union officials. By doing so, they defer the increased costs to future generations.
This is not a financial problem. This is really a political problem. It's the policy of what benefit levels are we going to provide and how are we going to fund them. And the option has been, because of the political environment, that labor organizations have put immense pressure on state and local politicians. The power of labor in state and local races has never been greater, and all you have to do is look at the independent expenditures that they're making on these races. As a result, they put pressure on the legislature to give higher benefits, sometimes in lieu of salary increases. And a legislator sits there and says, all right, I can give a salary increase, and that's going to come right out of this year's budget. Or I can give a benefit increase that really doesn't come out of this year's budget because it's actuarially funded. I can retroactively give the benefit, and at some point in the future, we'll have to cut services or increase taxes.
In 1978, Californians got so upset at the staggering escalating property taxes that they passed Proposition 13. As this pension debt starts to be felt, we asked Scott Minard if he thought there would be another taxpayer revolt, where Californians would mount another proposition to once again get control of government spending.
What might be the more concerning issue in the propositioning process is that it might very well turn out that the unions and the employees who are going to be ultimately forced probably to accept some kind of renegotiation of services might want to pass legislation that prohibits this. So the real issue here is, the real risk is in that area is not that the taxpayers are going to wake up fast enough and do this and basically put through some proposition that somehow limits pension benefits and so on and so forth, which would actually maybe be prudent to do. But it's more likely that the labor unions are much more organized than the general electorate, and they're the ones who might actually come forward and put in a proposition that would prohibit any changes to the benefits that are already promised.
So what's going to happen? We asked him to look into his crystal ball and predict the future for California citizens.
Certainly the taxpayers are going to revolt in terms of wanting to pay these higher taxes. And if they don't revolt, that may even be worse, because the tax burden in the state could become so high relative to other states that you really discourage economic development in the state of California. We're already experiencing some of that now because of the high tax rates. Corporations moving out of state. I personally know people of means and who had businesses here who have moved out of the state to Tennessee to escape the tax burden of the state of California. Ultimately, if there is no correction to this, it really dims the prospects for California's economic growth, which is now a vicious cycle. Because once we have slowed down economic development and growth in the state of California, and there are fewer high-paying jobs and wages, there's a smaller tax base to work with. And the liability is fixed. So we may actually have a diminution of the tax base, which would lead to lower tax revenues, which any attempt to increase the taxes would only exacerbate the problem.
We asked Scott Minard, as a financial expert, what is his greatest concern about the increasing debt we are facing?
The willingness of the electorate to indebt itself or its future for all of these things today is really problematic in that it isn't forcing the legislature to deal with the financial crisis we currently face. We're able to defer this into the future. The money that's coming from these infrastructure bonds, for instance, would have been money that came out of the general fund if we really felt these things had to be built. So therefore, all that has happened is that we've authorized Sacramento to borrow money on our behalf so that they can continue to spend the money in the general fund for what other purposes they want to.
Who's to blame? The incompetent politicians? The bond councils who make it so easy to borrow billions of dollars? Where do we point the finger so we can stop this erosion of our future?
I think a lot of the electorate is as guilty as the politicians, and that is that they have chosen to do the trade-off of what's good for me for today and let the consequences fall into the future when somebody else may have to pay for it. So it's easier to borrow money that our grandchildren will pay off so that we can have better highways today than to pay the bill ourselves. It's the voters who are making these choices. They are choosing to be able to line their pockets today with commitments from our treasuries so that they can have prosperity today at the expense of somebody else in the future. And ultimately, it will happen that we sell our rights away so that we can live at a certain standard today. So until the public realizes and wakes up and realizes that we are handing more and more authority over to our legislatures and to our executives that govern us, and that they are taking away our liberties and rights and our flexibility by raising our taxes and making bond commitments on our behalf, this process will continue. And hopefully that change, that great awakening for America, will come soon.